David Johnston's appearance at the House of Commons committee looking into China's interference, it didn't go so well. Hi, I'm Brian Lilley, political columnist with the Toronto Sun. There's two different aspects to what MPs were looking into when Johnston appeared before the committee to talk about his work, his report as Special Rapporteur looking into China's interference in Canada's democracy. There's the report itself and the holes that are within it, but there's also his close ties to Justin Trudeau and whether that posed a conflict of interest. But the Conservatives, well, they were right off the top trying to describe how from 2010 until 2017, both Justin Trudeau and David Johnston gave successive media interviews, made public comments about how close they and their two families were, how they'd been cottage neighbors, how they'd gone to the ski resort at Mont Tremblant together, how they'd Trudeau had described Johnston as a great dinner companion, and then how after his report came out and Johnston was quizzed about this, he called it a so-called friendship. Well, which one is true?
Now, Mr. Johnston, what we had before this committee are two completely different descriptions of your relationship with Justin Trudeau. Those two different descriptions cannot be accurate at the same time. So my question is simple and direct, Mr. Johnston. Were you telling Canadians the truth on May the 23rd or back in 2016?
After years of playing up the friendship at committee, Johnston once again downplayed the closeness of the two families. Well, he was either lying then or he's lying now, and that's not a good look for someone who's writing a report that basically says, just trust me. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnston, we can't just trust you because you were only telling the truth on one of those occasions, not all of them. So, which is it? I'm not sure that I believe him now. Then there's the issue of how Johnston decided to go about recusing himself of a conflict of interest or clearing himself. He turned to retired Supreme Court Justice Frank Iacobucci. Now, that sounds like a reasonable thing. He's a retired Supreme Court justice. But it turns out they've been friends for a long time, something Conservative MP Michael Barrett put to Johnston.
You've been friends with Frank Iacobucci for decades, is that correct?
Madam Chair, Professor Iacobucci and I were young law professors at the University of Toronto, I think when I was about 25, and yes, he's been a lifelong friend.
Johnston's now 81 years old, and he turned to someone who he's been friends with since he was 25 to tell him everything is A-OK over claims that he was too friendly with somebody else. This doesn't make sense. It undermines his credibility, and that's the whole problem. It's not that David Johnston isn't a well-regarded Canadian who's done great things, but you're accused of being too close to the guy that you're partially investigating, and you get cleared of that by someone you've been friends with for close to 60 years. That simply isn't acceptable. But neither is Johnston's report. And at various times, MPs from both the Conservatives and the NDP were poking holes in it, the Bloc as well. New Democrat Jenny Kwan asking about the irregularities in the nomination meeting of Liberal MP Han Don, something that Johnston wrote about in his report, and his reply to her was, what irregularities? He seemed confused at times, just like he was confused when Conservative MP Michael Cooper raised the issue of a Chinese Communist Party government website or government social media account distributing misinformation about the Conservatives. Why wasn't that in his account in Johnston's report? He couldn't answer. He seemed confused by what was being presented to him. He is a man who had a crash course in intelligence, who was in out of his depth, who gave the government a free pass, a government that he was too close to. Johnston's report is not credible, and MPs are doing a good job of pointing that out. Now they need to do a good job of continuing to push for a public inquiry. Let me know what you think. Drop a comment down below, share this on social media, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.